Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Ollie and welcome to another spiritual thought for the week. This week I want to share some thoughts and insights about conflict, which is quite a complex and tricky topic. And of course there's a lot of dreadful conflict that we see in the world at this moment. And between countries and groups of people, but also between individuals on a personal level. And yeah, it's true. I mean, life is full of these conflict challenges, and very often it can seem that other people cause the problems that we find ourselves pushed into. And this is described quite famously by the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre in his play No Exit, where one of the characters comments that, "So this is hell. I'd never have believed it. You remember all we were told about the torture chambers, the fire and the brimstone, the burning marl, old wives' tales. There's no need for red-hot pokers. Hell is other people." From family feuds to friends falling out, is hell really other people? Or is there another way of looking at conflict from a more spiritual and uplifting perspective? Why does conflict arise? And is there a way to resolve it, or at least find a more constructive way forward? So these are some of the topics we'll be taking a look at today. So conflict can be defined as an active disagreement or argument between people with opposing opinions or principles. And it's interesting to note the word active here. Conflicts often involve either side taking action, or reaction might be a better word, due to a perceived threat, hostility, insult, or injustice. And that action is often violent in nature, whether that is physically violent or verbally violent. And both sides usually perceive themselves to be the victim and better than the other, judging themselves as being kind of right and the other side wrong. And all too often, us humans project our own fearful beliefs onto those around us. That creates the perception of threat when quite often there is no threat. Unfortunately, the outcome of the resulting conflict is usually only seen in terms of winners and losers, rather than the third possibility of finding reconciliation, and doing that through mutual respect and a sort of shared desire for peace. The definition of reconciliation is the restoration of friendly relations, or the action of making one's view or belief compatible with another. From a spiritual point of view, conflict arises in our life on purpose, as part of our life plan that we put together before we came to the earth plane. And we did this to provide us with an opportunity to grow in awareness. Now, this growth is achieved by dispelling the fear that lies at the root of any conflict and finding reconciliation, not only with the other party, but perhaps more importantly, with ourselves. And through this process, we will also come to realize that we're not separate from the other side, from our adversary, but we are actually connected at many levels with them. We have common values that were perhaps previously buried under a false narrative. And this is the process of healing. When we look at conflict in this way, the question for either side then can change from, how do I defend against this threat that I see, I perceive, to what can I actually learn from the situation that's going to help me to dissolve the illusions of fear and separation that I've created within myself and between life. And I'm paraphrasing Dr. Peebles there, who is channeled through Summer Bacon. And in reality, we're all working through the challenges that life throws at us, or perhaps more accurately, that we attract into our lives as part of that life plan, so that we can discover more about who we actually are. And life gives us the opportunities then to strip away the limiting stories and beliefs that we've made about ourselves and how we perceive the world. And the purpose of that is so that we can rediscover and reclaim our true divine nature. And that nature is of love, of compassion, and wisdom. So, of course, conflict can be resolved most easily when there's willingness on both sides to reach out, to understand, and to explore creative solutions with a mutual respect. And this is the route to reconciliation. But what if only one side is willing? Spiritually, there is still good potential, great potential for growth in this situation, even in this seemingly one-sided scenario. And here's an insight that I received during the small hours of the morning when I was kind of tossing and turning in bed and just wondering about this stuff. And I think it explains a little about how spiritual growth may still be possible in this all too common one-sided situation. Here it is. By being here on earth, we receive a constant flow of opportunities to understand who we are more clearly. Through reflection on these events, we have the chance to change who we are if we want to. Listen to the small voice inside the heart, but not to the mind, which creates stories of hurt and fear. Discover who you are right now. Do you feel happy and at peace about this? And if you do, that's wonderful. If not, what do you want to change about yourself? Who do you want to become instead? It's folly to try and change someone else by imposing our will on theirs, because all beings have free will. And this is a universal principle. However, we all have the power to decide to change who we are. There are a billion perspectives through which we can view the world, and none of them are right or wrong, although the mind will try to create stories and try to convince the deeper part of us that it is the one in control, the one who is right. But it is deluded and is constantly trying to put the cart before the horse, putting itself before the heart. And in doing so, the mind separates us from others and from God. Listen to the small voice in your heart and decide who you want to be. So we all have the power to change ourselves, and in so doing, we can be the catalyst for reconciliation on a larger scale by being the change that we want to see in the world. And of course, that phrase from Mahatma Gandhi. So this is a subtle, personal, yet a powerful and positive energy transmission that comes outwards from us. And it effectively raises the vibrational frequency of the whole world. So small reconciliations, small steps forward can affect the whole world. So whether it's just one party that's willing or both, I recently heard Deepak Chopra invite world leaders to commit to several principles for the purposes of resolving conflict and finding peace between nations. And reading those, I realized that they could also form the basis for resolving personal conflicts. So I wanted to share some of those here, and I hope you find them useful. The first step involves both sides realizing that there are significant benefits to resolving the conflict. So each side can ask themselves what would happen if the conflict continued for the next 5 years, what would be the emotional, the physical, the financial, spiritual consequences. Or on the positive side, what would be the benefits of resolving the conflict as soon as possible? When that is explored, then both sides can cultivate the motivation to commit energy into the reconciliation process. And so it's essential from the outset to do this. And ideally, it's going to be done on both sides. So here are the principles from the Chopra Foundation. And I've summarized them a little bit and just condensed them a little bit from what there were. There were 9 that Deepak Chopra put forward. I've kind of put them into 5. So number 1, treat the other party with respect. It's a biggie. Start a conversation. So seek imaginative solutions within this step. Refrain from proving that the other person is wrong or bad. And we're seeking to understand rather than insist on being right. Refrain from belligerence. Speak in a way that's not hostile or aggressive. Otherwise, no progress is going to be made because the other side is going to dig in and defend themselves from a perceived attack. And refrain from ideological debates that seek to convince the other party that you're right. You know, that your particular idea or belief is the one that is right and they need to subscribe to. And it's a really good phrase to remember is a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So that first step is all about treating the other party with respect. Step 2, or principle 2, is being courageous enough to ask for forgiveness for any perceived threat or perceived trespasses and be willing to forgive so both sides can let go of the need to retaliate. So part of this principle is recognizing that there is the perception of injustice on both sides. Now here's the key word, perception. It's not whether there is or is not black and white. It's just the perception of the other party that counts and your perception. And there is always that perception of injustice on both sides that needs to be recognized. And be willing to meet on middle ground. So Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's famous for saying, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, and I'll meet you there. So that second principle of being courageous enough to ask for forgiveness for perceived trespasses and meeting at that middle ground is really, really key. Number 3, seek to understand your feelings and the feelings of the other side. So this is about cultivating empathy and using emotional intelligence. And again, quoting Marshall Rosenberg's conscious communication approach, he suggests asking and communicating without judgment. What am I observing the other party saying or doing? What am I feeling? What do I need? And how can we fulfill each other's needs? So each party asks that and communicates that without judgment. And acknowledge the other side's need to be heard, this third principle. So seeking to understand your feelings and the feelings of the other side. And when the other side feels heard, then progress can be made. Principle 4, understand and acknowledge each other's perspectives and values. Now, values, principles that guide our actions and decisions in life, and we can acknowledge each other's perspective and values, even if we don't agree with the other sides. Number 5, understand that fear is the basis of conflict on both sides. So this is the core of conflict. Fear arises when there's no understanding, and a lack of understanding arises when communication with respect breaks down. So those are 5 principles that Deepak Chopra put forward, and I feel that they can be applied to any kind of conflict. And nobody enjoys conflict. And if it's left to fester, then also often it becomes ugly, bitter, destructive on both sides. Yet when we view this through the lens of mutual respect, when we view conflict through that lens of mutual respect, non-violent communication, then conflict can become a really powerful opportunity and a catalyst for spiritual growth, for peace, and for self-realization. And that can be at a personal level and also at a collective societal level as well. It becomes an opportunity. So hell no longer becomes other people, because we become aware that our perception of others is simply a reflection of who we are. It's a reflection of ourselves. And when we step into that awareness of self, we receive the gift, an opportunity to decide who we want to be. And then, if we want to, we can change who we want to be. We can take the healing steps necessary to change, and so bring ourselves into better alignment, into truer alignment with our divine nature. So the Chopra Foundation principles that I've shared today for reconciliation, as I say, they can be applied to any level of conflict, from countries at war to acrimonious divorces. And the road to reconciliation may sometimes be long and difficult, but where there is a willingness to try, so the motivation, together with respectful communication and a desire to understand without judgment, then progress will always be made. And in addition, as a kind of side bonus, if you like, even the smallest reconciliation at a personal level, it transmits an expansion of love, of light, of peace into the world around us on an energetic level, so that each one of us actually does indeed create the world we want to see. Conflict is part of life, but it's also an opportunity. And I hope that any conflict that you do experience in this life, I hope that it can be a catalyst for your spiritual upliftment, for your growth in love, in light, and in peace. It's interesting to note that in 1971, Jean-Paul Sartre had an interview. And in that interview, he was asked about his statement that hell is other people. And he responded. He said, "But that's only that side of the coin. The other side, which no one seems to mention, is also heaven is each other. Hell is separateness, uncommunicability, self-centeredness, lust for power, for riches, for fame. Heaven, on the other hand, is very simple and very hard, caring about your fellow beings." Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would like to hear more about the spiritual dimension of life. And I hope that the ideas I've shared with you today can help you in your journey wherever you are. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.